Kianí. With us today is Kianí del Valle. You're a Berlin-based dancer, choreographer, actor, director, performance curator, originally from San Jose in Puerto Rico. And you have worked in many different places, obviously Berlin, but also New York, Montreal, London, Los Angeles, and Copenhagen. My first encounter with your work was my first conscious encounter with your work was around 2020 when you did Las Casas Invisibles at Funkhaus Berlin, which was a performance piece or series that really everybody was talking about at the time in the city, and in which you explored in an incredibly poetic way this topic of constant migration and kind of also of feeling the feeling of never arriving anywhere. And your practice is very embodied, obviously, and it almost appears like a ritualistic meditation on movement, on movement and the body. And thereby you create, I don't know how many of you have seen your pieces, but very powerful and deeply touching experiences. So many times I've seen people leave a performance of yours with like tears streaming down their face out of joy or just kind of being touched really by a piece. And that's very rare, and it's a beautiful thing, like really like it's goosebumps that you have created also for me. So very powerful, very cinematic in what you do. It's somewhere between, fuck the categories, but somewhere between contemporary dance and performance art. And maybe what's also special that it seems that all of your work is driven almost by a sociological or an anthropological interest. And enough said. Again, very excited to have you here, and please a warm applause for Kianí.
Hi guys, very excited to be here. I'm gonna take you a little bit into my world. If it's complicated or you feel lost, please tell me to stop because I'm gonna go. So yeah, it's a very difficult and challenging task to define who I am as an artist because I felt really alone in the beginning of my career. I have a background in painting and sculpture, and all my family was doing theater and acting, and I really didn't want to follow their steps. So I wanted to just do something very different, but life just took me into dance. And now what has happened is like my dance is very visual, and I treat my pieces as visual art too. And actually my main sources of inspiration are mainly film and painting, then choreographers. Like now I look up to choreographers, but for a long time I didn't have choreographers that I look up to. I have more writers and cinema directors, and somehow that filtrated into my dance work. So this is maybe the second or third time I give a lecture in a university. And it was very challenging in the beginning, and I always get really nervous. But I realized that something really important to talk about my practice is spontaneity and reinvention and creative process, because that's a really big part of things I do. Maybe I move this way, right? Is that good for the camera, or it doesn't matter? Okay, good. Okay, so what is creative process? The creative process is a set of stages or phases that are developed to implement creativity in order to solve a problem or initiate a project. The development of it can be chaotic. Many times the intuition, the act of error, the chance, or what we perceive as failure is what leads us to what we know as creative process. In this talk, I will talk about what creative process is to me. I will discuss some of my works, and I will mainly talk about some of my methods. I have many methods that I developed in now my 21 years of career. I hope the wrinkle cream is working. So I have many tools and like methodologies I created, but in this talk I will only talk about 3 methods in my creative process. One is el tercer oído, or the third ear. Other one is Error as a Tool, and the other one is movement maps or mapas de movimiento. And those are three of, I can say, I have 7 methodologies I created on my own, but today we will discuss 3. But we will get started with like some of my work and who am I. This is very long and I'm not going to read it, so I'm just going to explain a little bit of who I am. I'm from Puerto Rico, born and raised. I come from a father that was a drummer, but didn't pursue his dream of drumming and became a businessman. And my mom is a very well-known writer in Puerto Rico who is really dramatic, and she should have been an actress. And then my 2 older sisters are actresses, and I have uncles and aunts that were involved in the performance political movement in Puerto Rico called Taller de Histriones. So I had an environment that was highly creative, and I tried to rebel against all of that. I wanted to either do, at the beginning, I wanted to play soccer and basketball and do surfing and skateboarding. But then eventually I started painting and doing sculpture, and through my dad's sickness and my aunt taking care of me, I got involved into the dance scene in Puerto Rico. I started dancing around 11 years old, 12 years old with ballet, and I moved into contemporary dance, I think when I was 14 or 15. So for people, for the academic dance world, I started quite late, but now that I'm a contemporary teacher, it's never too late to start. I studied at the Fine Arts University in Puerto Rico, so when I graduated high school, I went into a bachelor's for experimental painting. And in my second year of university, I was doing paintings that I was executing them with my body, with my feet or with my hands or with my knees. I would have this painting knee pads where I would just do knee pad choreography and like do these paintings. And it was one of my professors in La Escuela de Artes Plásticas de Puerto Rico who on critic day told me, you should drop out of school, like you should pursue your dance career. And I was really in shock, but he told me like, you can paint whenever, just go and dance. So I dropped out of school, moved to New York City. My mom was the dean of the University of Puerto Rico, so she didn't talk to me for 5 years because I was the first woman to drop out of school in my family. I went to New York, and I was luckily accepted in Alvin Ailey Dance Company. I was there for 2 years, and then I moved to Montreal, and I did a choreography program more in contemporary dance with a minor in painting. So Montreal was a city where I finally was able to like connect all those things I liked. And I graduated with a bachelor's in fine arts with concentration in contemporary dance choreography and a minor in experimental painting. When my visa expired in Canada, I went back to New York, and I was doing a little bit of everything. And that got me connected to some German friends that I met. And I was coming and going to Berlin, but never thinking I would live here. And I started doing some projects here. Long story short, it's been 18 years of migration far away from Puerto Rico. And now my work is highly based on collaborations. It's highly transdisciplinary, I must say. Yes. So maybe we can discuss some of my recent works. These are some of the works I find super important, but we won't have time to discuss them all. But we can start with I Have Gone Taller from Standing with Trees. It's a piece that I did in 2018 with Claudia Comte, the Swiss artist, in which Claudia took the Copenhagen Contemporary Art Museum and basically transformed all of the main hall. She took trunks of trees from basically tree cemeteries that happened all over Europe to make different constructions. So she kind of rescued these trees and gave them new life. The carpet is based on frequencies of trees, on how trees communicate. And it was basically those frequencies were printed. I basically lived inside of this installation for a whole year. And I was a sort of cyborg entity that was remembering 7 different animals in the forest. In this work, we collaborated with Egon Eliud, who's an Austrian Guatemalan, Berlin-based composer. Yes, I don't know if we want to go video by video. Do you want to look at snippets of the pieces while we go? Okay, awesome. So let's just really briefly look at I Have Grown Taller from Standing with Trees. Mm-hmm. Is the volume up? No, there should be other sound. Sorry, guys. That's not, there we go. That was, yeah. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, let's go. So we continue here. Yes. Yes. So with I Have Grown Taller from Standing with Trees, I have to say that it was very interesting to me because I always been had a passion for biology all my life and anthropology. And the process of working with Claudia, we were in the Swiss Alps for a very long time, and we were understanding the behavior of animals, particularly bears, deers, what else? The butterfly. So in the video that you saw, this is mainly the butterfly animal, but there's a long version that was presented at Kianí Gallery where you can see the 7 different animals. And in the live performance, it was the 7 different animals, and it was an hour solo performance. And I felt like I was gonna die at the end of the performance. But it was really fun for me. I think as a dancer and a performer, I dance for companies. I danced for Alvinelli Dance Company, and I had a short period at the Sasha Waltz Dance Company here in Berlin. And I also worked with Matan Nicola Dance Company here, which was formed by Matan and Nicolas, who used to be dancers of Sasha. So I think it got to a point in my career where I really realized that I have my own language and my own understanding of what movement is, specifically for the upbringing that I have and also for the things that were interesting me in general. So I think the project with Claudia, I mean, we're starting at 2018, but you know, I left Puerto Rico in 2004. So between the two years I was in Alvinelli, the 4 years I was in school in Montreal, and the few years that I was back in New York freelancing, there was a lot of development and kind of understanding where am I headed. And in that point, a lot of confusion, because in the dance world, at least when I started, they make you believe that you have to dance for a dance company. And then when you get injured, you can be a choreographer. But the reality is that I was always choreographing since I was even in painting school. Like when I was making the paintings with my body, I was choreographing. And when I'm making short videos, I am choreographing. So I feel that there's a lot of misconceptions, not only in the dance world. I think you guys are probably also facing that in your own practices. And it was the way of finding my own trust in these collaborations that got me into not being afraid to define myself into what I'm doing, you know. So the Claudia project was amazing because it connected my love for biology and anthropology, but also it was a big wake-up call because, I mean, I'm gonna share a personal story, but for example, I was a whole year in Copenhagen developing this solo, and then I developed a trio and I developed a quintet too. So I was able to not only understand animals from my own body, but also compose with other bodies. And it was so much work. Like, I mean, I literally gave my all, and the piece kind of had a lot of hype because of the video work. Like, of course, people went to see the installation, but the piece started getting a lot of hype, and I started getting contacted by Fact Magazine, like Art in America contacted me, and a lot of people wanted to interview me and not the artist, not the visual artist, even though we're friends, you know. But it was basically it was a big conversation between Claudia and I, because at that point, when I entered into conversation with Kianí Gallery, they were like, the reality, Kianí, is that you don't own this choreography because I did it inside of Claudia's installation. And even though the work became famous because of my performance and because of the video work, I didn't own the choreographies. So the reason why I show that, sometimes when I do these lectures, I don't like to show it, because basically after this work is when I start owning my own work. But I like to show it too because it was a big turning point, you know. So I also discussed this in the beginning of our lecture, because collaborations are important, but just to pick your brains, in which way we find a happy medium that we're all equal, I don't know, directors of the work, or maybe directors is not the right word, because now from this works onwards that I'm gonna show you, all those works I directed and all those works are owned by me, and they still involve collaboration, but it doesn't mean that the work is completely mine. So from this work, I also understood that I wanted to own my own work, and when I bring collaborators to my work, I also want them, for example, my composers have all released music on their albums, the music that they make for my work, you know what I mean? So they are collaborators and I am directing, but I want them to also be able to use that work for their own practices, which is something I couldn't basically do with this. Like, it was released in Fact Magazine and it was screened at Kianí Gallery, and we had the show at Copenhagen Contemporary. But when Art in America came to me, when all other art magazines came to me, I couldn't speak about the work. I was not allowed to speak about the work. So anyways, a little bit of things to pick your brain. The next piece that we're going to talk about is catacoustic flesh, or carne catacústica. Catacoustic is the science that studies echoes. I've always been someone that I've been very immersed into the music scene. My father used to be a drummer, and my uncle was a really well-known pianist, and in Puerto Rico I grew up with musicians. But also when I moved to Montreal, I was an international student. It was very hard. Like, nobody was paying for my school. I was paying for school myself, and I had like 7 different jobs apart from being in school. And my main job was being the door girl at 2 clubs, and I got to know a lot of the people in the music scene in Montreal, and I got very, very close with the people from Vatter Records and like from many record labels in the city. So I got immersed without realizing in a very vibrant music scene in Montreal, and all of a sudden I was in school presenting choreographies every semester, and like famous DJs and producers will be producing my work, you know. So I was bumping heads with these people. So this has been something recurrent in my work. There's always a live musician or a live producer, and if they're not live, they are tailoring everything with me every step of the way. And in Carne Catacústica, I wanted to also find a different symbiotic effect with music. I wanted to, instead of someone giving me the track or discussing the music, the choreographic score with the musician to create it, I wanted to come to the studio and make the track from my body. So we geared all Flóra with contact microphones. We have bullet microphones from the ceiling, and I was basically scoring the music with my breath, with my falls, with my movement. And then I had a musical producer amplifying that, echoing that, looping it, and I also had control to do it. So it was a very, very fun project to do. So in this works under the premise of a symbiotic relationship between body movement and sound. It works on equal conditions between body movement. It works on equal conditions between choreography from the musical composition and the development of the characters based on elements of dance theater. The piece is inspired by the allegorical novel by Frank Kafka entitled Metamorphosis, and it studies on different insects, particularly the ladybug and its 4 stages of metamorphosis. So I work with a fashion designer from London called Boyes, who now has the lead directorial position at Louis Vuitton in Paris, funny enough, but in that moment he was starting in London. And in that moment he was creating pieces of clothing that were inspired on insects, but he will go to car cemeteries, take car parts, like break them up, and then make molds out of them. And it will create really weird cocoons or stuff like this, for example. This is how I was starting the piece. I was inside of that, and then I will emerge from it, and then I will wear the piece. So this is other thing that I've been simultaneously trying to work through my work. It's a lot of like growth, progression, shape shifting, shading the skin, and at the same time, how do all the elements I put on stage are either wearable or become set design or become weapons or tools for the performer. So in this case, what looked like a set design, it all of a sudden had my head like coming out of it, and it becomes my costume. So this is Catacoustic Flesh, and we can watch a little bit of it here. I think this is too long, but we can watch the beginning. Can we have more volume? Thank you. just to show you a little bit. We continue with, where are we? Sorry. Oh. Where are we? Here. Yes. So, next thing, Las Casas Invisibles 2020. In 2019, I was given the first ever choreographic residency in Funkhaus, Berlin. There was never a choreographer in residency there before. And it was very great because we had a whole year of residency. For a whole year, I will have the dancers for a week each month. And that gave me the opportunity to have time to grow with dancers. Like, I've been choreographing for a long time and making works for a long time, but it's very hard to get a lot of time with dancers. Normally commissions are like, if I am lucky, I have 2 months to prepare a work or a month. So I just was very, very hungry to like get to know dancers, develop work with them. So basically after the year, this was the piece that we did. It was a very special day, actually. Funkhaus with Saal 1 was sold out twice. So in one night, 6,000 people came to see us because the main hall fits 3,000 people. So on one night we did 2 shows. And it was super fun. The dancers that were with me are also from all over the world. And we had 3 Berlin born and raised dancers too that were also dancing and migrating all over the world for their careers. So at the end, the concept of migration, it was not something that was mine. You know, it became something that we all shared. And all these ideas were translated into visual and in sonic ideas too. I saw the piece, going back to painting, I saw the piece as a triptych, like as a painting in 3 parts. So I invited 3 musical producers. One of them is Floating Points from the UK. The other one is Lotic, who's based here, they're based here. And the other one was Raven Bush. He's the nephew of Kate Bush, an incredible violinist. So the triptych, we were able to convey, yes, with the choreographic script, but also with the lighting, with the way that the dancers were approaching the space. The piece was highly site-specific, so each chapter had a different way of relating to the space, and it also had different sonic interventions. So these are some of the incredible dancers who still to this day, some of them are working with me. Yeah, and I don't know if we can watch all the videos, but we can maybe watch the making of, which is very, very short. Something I wanted to mention is that, in my practice or in the dance world or whatever, in the art world, a lot of people concentrate on just doing solos or just doing ensemble works. It's also been interesting for me because I've been also working a lot at the UDECA, the UFER studios. I rent them for my own work. And also when you see the program there, it's either a solo program or an ensemble program. And my practice hasn't been married to either or. Like, I've been developing solos simultaneously as I've been making ensemble works. And I've been also making what I call multimedia solos that are holographic pieces where I'm not present dancing, but I am dancing in a hologram, or I am dancing in like video vignettes that are part of an installation. So yeah, that's something that I also want to put on the table. Like, I also feel very alone, specifically in the Berlin dance scene, because people are making ensemble pieces, and the people are making solos, and I am here playing in all chords at all times. Yeah. So here we go with the making of Las Casas Invisibles. Okay, I'm gonna try to move faster. I have 20 minutes to go. Okay. So, a conversation with Joseph Beuys. Probably I cannot show you all the videos, but I'm gonna keep talking, yeah? So, a conversation with Joseph Beuys was a commission in 2021 during the pandemic. We were still in pandemic in 2021, yes. And Hamburger Bahnhof, in collaboration with the Berlin Institute of the Art and Sleek magazine, wanted to do museum interventions. It was also the 100 years of Joseph Beuys. And I was invited to make a work. I decided to make a gumbo of 2 pieces of Joseph Beuys. I Like America and America Likes Me in 1974, and The End of the 20th Century in 1983. The piece, The End of the 20th Century, is in the permanent collection of Hamburger Bahnhof. And I don't know if you guys have been able to see the piece, but it has these circular incisions that are really, really perfect. And I was basically feeling really lucky because the museum was closed and I was just like lying on the floor hanging out with the work. I also, something very interesting to mention about that work, The End of the 20th Century, that is on permanent collection at Hamburger Bahnhof, is that Joseph Beuys passed away months before its first installation, or I think on the same year. I hope I'm not wrong, but I know he was already prepared the work. So it's an installation piece that the curator has to collaborate with the work, because each curator that works with the piece decides how it's installed, you know? And I also thought that there was something interesting about the movement of these pieces and where the curator decides that these pieces are in the space. So something particularly that I was telling the museum that I wanted to have, apart from the conceptual aspect of it, was to make the incisions in my body in all photography. And we also made some 3D videos that had the incisions of the actual voice pieces on my skin. And there's a video that you can find online, but I'm gonna keep moving. And this was a video work, and it was also screened at Hamburger Bahnhof. Hermanas Brujas is a ensemble piece, also again with my dance ensemble, the KDB Dance Ensemble, and was presented the same year at Silent Green, Berlin. And this piece is actually an homage. In 2020, my father passed away, and it was a very crazy situation because it was my aunt, my sisters, my mom, and me. We were like 5 women living inside of this apartment in Boston, where we had to fly my father in a helicopter from Puerto Rico because from the pandemic nobody could leave. It was super stressful. And then they brought him to Boston to this cancer center, and because it was pandemic, we all had to like be in one house and do testing every day and all of this. And then it was very interesting because I'm the youngest in my family, but I am the baby that never was allowed anybody to treat me like a baby because I left so young. Like when I left Puerto Rico, I was 18, and when I left my parents' house, I was 17. So it was the first time in almost 25 years that I was in the same room with my mom, my aunts, my sisters. And then all of a sudden it created this crazy connection with our ancestral womanhood and who we are. And then I started getting to know the stories of my family. And I don't know if you guys know, but Puerto Rico was firstly inhabited by indigenous people that were massacred and killed by the Spaniards. And the place that they show you where Christopher Columbus arrived first, it was Puerto Rico. And he called the indigenous people Indians because he thought he was in India, but he was in Puerto Rico. And my name, Kianí, is a Taíno name, it's an indigenous name. So it was through that meeting that was happening because of the death of my father and the passing of my father that I got connected with my ancestral history, and I decided to make this piece called Hermanas Brujas, which is Witch Sisters. And it's basically connecting, the piece is basically an hour ritual, and it's connecting Catholicism with Aboriginal spiritual practices. And and it's a performative ritual. There's very little to no video of this online because it was a very intense piece, and the girls finished the piece completely naked. I work a lot with nudity in my solo works, and I feel really comfortable doing it because I also been a figure drawing model for many years, and I've been working on nudity in my solos for a very long time, but I've never put that practice with my ensemble work. This was the first time I did it, and it was a highly cathartic process for the dancers. And the end of the piece that we're ending on headstands with basically their vaginas on open and their legs open, and then a lot of dry ice that was covering their heads, so you couldn't see their heads. And it's been very difficult to have video online of it, but we're currently working on a new commission to make the piece happen again in Berlin. So if you're interested, I hope you get to see it. Cuerpo Presente, Cuerpo Ausente was a piece I did during the Venice Biennale in 2022 through the Feireiss and the Curatorial School, who I think they've been here talking to, the Feireiss, or no? And this was a very interesting solo, and again, after my father's death, I've been working a lot with the idea of a body that's inactive, or what happens to the body after death. And the piece is online, and you can see it anywhere if you want to check it out. La Luz is the last video I really want to show. So La Luz is a multimedia solo. It's a kinetic audiovisual 4D sound installation that discusses a dying body's conflict between the detachment of its physicality and the attachment of its intellectual psyche. Firstly, developed as a text, the work is a reflection of myself, my experiences witnessing the passing of my father through a collaborative responsive process between music composition, visual script, choreography, and technology. The day before my father passed away, he didn't want to talk to anybody except for me. And he was seeing visions, and he was asking me to write them down. And he was now I laugh because he was being really funny about it. I'll write them down and I'll read them to him, and he would be like, no, I said green. And I'm like, okay. And so I really had to, he was being really, really precise. So I had 2 massive texts of things that he wrote, and then 24 hours after, he passed away. So for a long time, I was like, I have to do something with this text. And what the text was saying was really crazy, because what he was seeing his mother in a dark corner, and he was saying, I want to reach my mother, but I can't get there because I'm sinking, and my feet are heavy. So the more that I was reading the text, the more I was realizing that I had in my hands something very unique. I had basically his subconscious, like what he was seeing before he passed. So when I was offered to make this holographic piece, this is a company called LED Pulse Media, and they work normally in Dubai and Las Vegas, making like very cheesy commercial installations. And this is the first time they commissioned this technology for an artist. And they never done anything 3D, holograms are normally flat. So this was a volumetric display. And then we were presenting at Monum Studios here in Berlin, which is a 4D sound space. So I had in my hands like an incredible text, volumetric display to make basically 3D hologram, and then I had a 4D sound space. So I was immediately being like, I'm going to perform through this hologram. I'm not going to be there live. It needs to be an immersive experience. So it was a really beautiful installation. Ludwig van Dinger, who's one of my composers, basically throughout the process, we were all crying constantly and laughing a lot. So it was a very cathartic process. But I basically see La Luz as the portal between my father and I. And I really, whenever I present this work, I feel that he's really coming through the lights. So I call it the portal piece. So for this, I'm going to show a little bit, and then I'm going to, how many minutes I have left?
Like 10.
I'm going to show 2 minutes because I want to talk about other things. So this is La Luz. show some of the dance parts. So the piece had one text, which was my father's text, which is the one with the red face. And then it had a second text, which was my answer to him that he never got to hear. But I basically answered the text to him through the work. This work is online and you can watch it. Let's get to, sorry. How do I go full screen? Here, sorry. I just wanted to discuss very quickly some techniques and things I do. So, el tercer oído, or the third ear, is something I say it to my dancers and they're like, oh, okay, they already know what I mean. So el tercer oído, or the third ear, is silence as a method of development in life and in your own creative studies. In life, we live stimulated by images every day. The third ear is the practice of sound absorption to disconnect with the visual. In the studio, silence in my movement practice has given me the opportunity to find my inner rhythm, to trust my body, natural impulses, and to be more confident when the piece needs specific music or not. We do a lot walks through the city or outside the studio and closing our eyes and perceiving sound without visual. And in the studio, we also just extract music and move in silence. Musical transposition, number one, I divide this in two parts. Number one, use another musical reference in your mind, contrary to the one present that the audience sees. It creates interesting visual dynamics and complexities in composition. I'm not going to show the video because it takes us a long time, but in between 2014 and 2017, I was on tour with Clark and with Aphex Twin as a dancer, and we will often basically, this was that both Clark and Aphex loved the idea, and we kept doing it for every tour, and basically we had a lot of tracks that we were moving exactly to the sound of the music, but there were a lot of tracks where me and the other dancer were dancing to a completely different sound. It was usually Purple Rain or Billie Jean from Michael Jackson. So that will create a juxtaposition where the audience will really be like paying attention, because we were really sharp, we were completely together, but we were not matching the music. And then that will allow you to understand the music differently, try to find different things in the body that you will normally not see, and not to be redundant with sound and body, basically. So, for example, in this Fuji Rock video, the movement that we're doing is, Billie Jean is not my lover, she's just a girl who thinks I am the one, but the kid is not my son. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and go. Billie Jean is. Yeah, so me and the dancer only knew that, and then in the background it was Aphex very crazy. Yeah. So this is el tercer oído one idea, and then el tercer oído second idea is, through my practice I have found that many times when the sound composition of the piece has already been selected, it limits the expansion of the movement. I found that my body created crutches or patterns to react directly to the music. For this reason, once the choreography is ready, I often use other music in the studio, usually 2 weeks before the show or the performance. So I do this to my dancers. They always want to kill me, but when they are completely nailed to each sound of the music, I change the music. And they're like, why? Because they've been super into counts. And I do it on purpose, because that's going to take me to my next method, but it's mistakes as a tool. When mistakes happen, sometimes there's something new and I like to keep it. So I just like to play with that, even though my dancers hate it, but I do that often. Then error as a tool. Sometimes you come to the studio with preconceived ideas, and other times those ideas can be concretized with the consistency of your practice. How do you use error as a tool and put ego aside? Letting go of the work, becoming an audience, a spectator, omnipresent entity. Let the piece tell you a story. So I work with video a lot, specifically because I work a lot with solos. So for a really long time, I record myself all week, but I don't watch the video. And then when I think I have the piece quite ready, then I start watching at the video and like being my own audience into the work, and I start finding new things. When it's work in team and not solo, invert the characters in order to find new possibilities. Also, the dancers hate this. So the dancer has been learning one position of the choreography for 2 months. And then 2 weeks before the show, I'm like, you go to here, you go to there, and they want to kill me. But there's amazing things that happen. And sometimes it happened in Las Casas Invisibles with Marcus and Annalise. They were like, actually, can I stay in this role? And I'm like, great. And I allow them to do it. Yeah, I like to be open and free, and I'm not so fixated into things. I like to still, even to the last day, kind of like continue to develop and finding new things. The last thing I want to discuss is mapas de movimiento or movement maps, and this started as a mistake. I'm thinking I divorced myself completely from painting and drawing and sculpting, but the past 5 years of my work, I have my sketchbook, and I start making points of where the bodies are moving, and then I realize that I make this super weird diagrams in my notebook that I only understand. But the more that I work with dancers, the more that they understand my drawings too. So without realizing, I started developing a practice of movement maps, and these movement maps are for my independent work, but now I'm starting to develop movement maps as my own painting practice. So you have caught me in a really amazing moment where I'm doing a full circle. I'm coming back into my drawing practice, and I actually have a exhibition in Puerto Rico, my first solo exhibition, which will include choreography, sculpture, and drawing. Is this next March next year. And this all started because I'm really close friends with this curator in Puerto Rico, and she started seeing my movement maps, and she was like, Kianí, you're coming back. You're closing the circle. And I was like, you think so? And they were like, yes. So yeah, so here are my movement maps. This is a digital movement map of my global travels around the world. And then we can also find choreographical movement maps of my choreographies. Yeah. And yeah. And I think that's it. There's more techniques and more secrets to share, but we need another class. So that's it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Actually, can we go back to the last picture?
Yeah.
I'm super inspired by, very beautiful. Thank you so much, Kianí. You touched upon a lot of subjects that are very dear to me. I also realized Lotek, who you mentioned twice, gave a talk here as well 4 semesters ago.
Oh, wow.
In the very beginning. So there's a couple of other circles closing as well.
Cool.
So let's start with the error part, no? Because I think that's one that's very interesting and has been also asked in the Q&As afterwards, like what one learns from these errors. And actually to make this into mythology is obviously the next step. There's a quote by Stuart Brand. Does Stuart Brand ring a bell? The founder of the Whole Earth Catalog, yeah? Like California, 60s, etc. But he had this thing called failure by failure approach to perfection. So the only way to get somewhere is making a lot of mistakes. So that's one. And then talking also about failures, I was very appreciative. In the very beginning, you talked about your first collaboration with another gallery as well, involved as well, and also like the tricky sides of this. And you just said there's more secrets or dirty secrets to share. And I think that's maybe something that's interesting for also here, all the students. these, I don't know, cheat codes or dirty secrets that are usually not really talked about. But I find them very interesting. And I think this came since last talk by Emily Siegel, that I've been thinking to develop a whole seminar where you invite only artists and they share their dirty secrets. Wouldn't it be great? Because there's a lot that's
there's
not
a
really,
lot of them.
There's a lot that's not addressed in in the kind of artistic education. No? You learn to become whatever you're studying, but really how the game works, well, you don't really get to know that. So anyways, could you share a few more of these
dirty secrets?
Dirty secrets of yours, number one. And then again, what I always ask, maybe or your dirty secret or your personal key to collaboration, because it's, as you said, it's a tricky one. It can be fantastic and enrich us. It can also totally fail. But what's your personal secret here?
To collaboration?
Yes.
Well, I think now I'm in a very good moment because I found my team, you know? I found at the moment it's very rare. I was always changing composer constantly because I like to switch it up, but I've been working with Ludwig van Dinger now for my past 5 pieces, which is unheard of because I always switch. But I find it really exciting because, for example, in La Luz, it was through the collaboration with Ludwig that he was telling me, you should talk and sing in this piece. And I was like, I don't sing and I don't do. And he was like, well, you can do spoken word or whatever, you know, because in a way, when you find really good collaborators, you know, Ludwig has also, when the composition of La Luz came out, Ludwig was like, you're co-composer. I'm like, why? I don't write music. It's like everything in this work, it's directed by you. Like you're co-composing the work with me, you know? So I don't know if it's a dirty secret, but I feel like if you find your people, it's very exciting where you can get into deeper parts of your creative process. And the trust is like, once you have trust, you can literally, I throw myself in the abyss and my collaborators will catch me. And little things like when I worked with nudity in Hermanas Brujas, it was a very tough process. Like the girls all have different traumas, different backgrounds. It was very intense. And then I started realizing that, you know, I was touching on subjects that were really delicate to people that maybe to me, because my practice is such a big part of who I am in the world, even in how I exist, sometimes it's very hard because I have no separation between my work and who I am. And my work is who I am, you know, and a lot of dancers don't see their work like that, and it doesn't mean that they're bad dancers. And a lot of artists or musicians, you know. So it really, for example, the difference between working with nudity and working with subjects that are vulnerable for a female naked body in Hermanas Brujas was super challenging. But then when we did the holographic piece, I'm in a room completely naked, performing with kinetic cameras around me, with 20 nerds working on the hologram and doing the 4D sound, and you know, and somehow, I don't know if it's the way that I approach the work. I'm training transcendental meditation. I don't know if you guys have any awareness of what transcendental meditation is, but that has really helped my work. And I'm also a big fan of David Lynch, and David Lynch used to do transcendental meditation with everybody on his set before starting to film. So I often do not a full meditation session, but I do breathing exercises, visualization exercises, and I stretch. I stretch with the nerds and with the technicians, and like everybody is on the same page. So maybe that creates an equal environment for everybody, to a point that when I'm naked in front, I'm like literally talking to the technician completely naked and nobody cares, you know, it's normal, you know. So I don't know if that's a secret or a trick, but I'll say like finding like a little ritual with your team and with your collaborators will always help you not come into crazy, like, you know, bumping and like accidents with your collaborators. For example, with Claudia, even though Claudia and I love each other, she was very, very busy during that time. And often I was alone talking to the museum, or I was alone talking to the videographer. Sander Hochriver is my best friend that has shot me in all my videos, so he knows me very well. So I do, even though Claudia and I are friends now, with that situation, one of the reflections we had was that. Even Claudia was like, I should have been there with you the whole time, and I should have, And I took that into my work, and that's why I started the lecture with that piece, because even I grew up a lot from that piece, and I am taking that into all the works I'm directing and choreographing and performing in. So yeah, finding a good team, finding a ritual with your team, growing with your team, trusting. Yeah.
Good advice. Now to you. Again, questions from your side, and no shame in the game. No such thing as a stupid question. Who wants to go first? Yes, please.
I want to say thank you, Kianí, for your presentation, for being also so vulnerable with us, sharing all these very personal stories. But from when you were speaking about your practice, I feel like you seem very in tune with your process, and I could be wrong, but it feels like a lot of it comes very naturally to you, and you even create your own kind of codes, el tercer oído and la paz de movimiento. So was that something that you had naturally always within you, or is it something that you kind of learned and developed along the way in your path and in your career?
I mean, el tercer oído, nobody taught me that I develop it and put a name to it, basically. And same with the movement maps, same thing. I think I was always very inventive, and I think we should not lose the child inside of us. I think we should always keep playing. When we lose the child inside of us and we really you have to study and you have to train because this is why you're here. But I also believe that, of course, you have to study the masters and everybody, but you need to play. You need to play with your own stuff. You need to play. And if you don't want to do autobiographical work, that's fine. Even, I'm friends with Anna Underberg, who's an incredible Berlin artist, and her work is not autobiographical at all. But we've been spending some time, and she's very playful with her work, I think as long as you keep playing and these new concepts will come to you. I think if you don't have a practice, it's very hard to develop these things, I think having a practice and playing around and fucking things up, it's what makes you arrive to these concepts, I think if I didn't dance every day, or if I didn't make sure I put goals to myself, I'm last year was a little bit insane. Last year I made 3 ensemble pieces and 5 solos. It was very intense. But this year I'm starting slow because I'm also, apart from this, I'm doing other commissions, and I'm also choreographing artists, and I'm doing millions of other things. But I feel that I always put goals to myself. I'm okay, my goal this year is to prepare this first exhibition for next year. And I have a new ensemble work, and I just premiered a solo in Dresden. So I was very comfortable with being, if I do 2 solos and 2 ensemble pieces this year and prepare for my exhibit next year, I'm fine, And then finding hours of studio practice every week. And I think the more that you have a practice, the more that playfulness will come naturally, I think, at least for me, yeah.
Maybe a follow-up question, and then see you again. You said playing around and fucking things up. And you mentioned the Casas Invisibles, that you kind of practiced for 2 months. First of all, amazing that you had a year in Copenhagen, a year for Las Casas. That's unheard of, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you said 2 months or 2 weeks before the premiere, you switched the position.
Yeah.
So could you elaborate a little bit more on the development of these? So you do obviously don't come with this finished script and said, okay, guys, this is what we're going to do for the next 2 months. But this is actually developing in the making. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, for Las Casas, I prepare a deck like if I was like pitching a movie to Paramount Studios, like hardcore, like a deck that was like 50 pages, like explaining each chapter, because I saw the work as a triptych. And for me, the first stage was introducing these characters that existed before you even arrive. Like when you arrive to the performance hall, the dancers were already there. They were standing in the back, others were in another position, and you happen to not be an audience. You arrive into the world of them, and they were there existing for years and years before you arrived. So I wanted the first part of the triptych to be like, these people have been here for a long time. They found each other in their own journey, and they move in a really particular way. So the first chapter was really unison, and that's all I knew. Of course, through practice, you're like, let's create unison pieces. Let's create similar behavior, you know, similar looks for everybody. And then we try different things that work. And it's a really kind of global concept. First part is unison, existing character, and they've been here for 2 years before the audience arrived. That's it. And then through practice, you develop what that is. Like, second triptych was slowly seeing how those characters have individuality, even though in the first chapter they look the same. And at the end, at the beginning of the third chapter, they're all kind of like colonized or possessed by this other energy that in my mind is probably everything that happened to Puerto Rico. But then I also, speaking to people from Australia, speaking to people from Africa, like colonization, and even beyond colonization, just like displacement of peoples and communities happens in every fucking country. So I feel that I have really global concepts for the three. And then throughout the year, we just workshop those ideas individually. Like we took 1 month to develop this idea of unison and character, like, and then 2 months to figure out the individuality of 15 people. You know, how I make 15 people look completely different and behave differently. And then the rest of the year to find how an entity that's beyond them corrupts them and their space. And then the end of the year to compose all those ideas together, simultaneously talking to the composers, developing the music. And yeah, so it starts from global ideas, but in my mind they're really visual and really specific. And I'm working simultaneously what I see in my mind visually with composition. And then we just try and play in the studio until I'm like, that's it. And we find it, yeah.
Yeah, very brave. Questions? Yes, please. Thank you.
Hi, I also want to say thank you. Like, I'm so happy I came today because I'm not even studying here. I'm also from the dance and performance field, and I'm studying dance, Tanzwissenschaft at FU, and I just came here because I love your work.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, you had a big influence also on me. And
oh, wow.
And I wondered, because I also know, and you also talked about it today a little bit, that in the beginning you, like with your approach and everything, was kind of alone in this performance scene, and was there something that helped you to just stick to your vision and to not, because I know also how the performance scene can also be really competitive, and also there's like things that count as contemporary and it's mostly conceptual things, and I wonder if you had something that helped you like just
one book, it's called El Libro de los Abrazos, the Book of Hugs from Eduardo Galeano. He's a Uruguayan author. El Libro de los, the Book of Hugs. El Libro de los Abrazos. And I had a really horrible situation because when I was accepted in Alvinelli, when I moved from Puerto Rico, I was in every newspaper in Puerto Rico, like Puerto Rican dancer, Alvinelli. My parents were really proud, la, la, la. And then after the year, I dropped out of Alvinelli, and my mom is very hardcore. I come from a very hard mom. My mom was always very hard on me. And she already didn't talk to me because I dropped out of painting school, and then I finally made it into a big company, and I dropped out of that company, and it was very hard for me, and I was very lost, you know. So when I moved to Canada, I was 22, and I moved on a Greyhound bus. I don't know if you know what a Greyhound bus is. It's pretty dodgy. It's like a bus where all the crackheads basically smuggle drugs from state to state. So I crossed the border to Canada on a Greyhound bus with 22 and parents not supporting me, and I just got there because I got accepted into this program, and there was a lot of doubts and that I was maybe not doing what I could. And Puerto Rico, I don't know if you guys know, it's a U.S. territory. This is another conversation because it's very fucked up what's happening in Puerto Rico and what they've done to my country. And my parents were involved in the political movement that was trying to make Puerto Rico free. So I also grew up in manifestations and in demonstrations, and I saw the police beat up my dad. And I grew up in a really artistic but also politically heated country. So when I left, and I also had a mom that wanted me to just be the perfect girl or be a perfect ballet dancer, and I clearly wasn't that. I found this book in Montreal in a random bookstore, and it's a book that I have to say I carry to this day with me, and I always read it. And actually now I'm planning with the curator my exhibition, and I'm bringing back this book, even though I've read many other books. But El Libro de los Abrazos it's a book that's this thick, and it has short stories, like very short stories in each page, and drawings from the author. So it also gives this multidisciplinary practice. And I feel at the end of the day that my pieces are also short stories. And if we go back, this is something that my producer was telling me, because I just did a solo called, oh my God, I did a solo last week and I forgot the title of my solo. What was it? What was the title of my solo? Oh my goodness. I've been doing too much work. Yeah, I've been trying to make all my titles in Spanish, but some of them are not. But for example, we have Carne Catacústica, we have Las Casas Invisibles, which means the invisible houses. Basically, all the names I'm gonna tell you, if you put them together, I'm kind of creating like a game show. I'm kind of creating like a world in a video game, because it's kind of like Las Casas Invisibles, which means the invisible houses. Then Tierra Quemada, which means burning soil. So there's invisible houses. The soil is burning. Then Vacío Suspendido, which means suspended emptiness. Then La Luz. Then Blood of My Blood. Then Present Body, Absent Body. Then Catacoustic Flesh. Like if I wanted to, with all those concepts, I can make one big painting. You know what I mean? And it's all part of one world, So I think in this world, I didn't realize this, but in this world that I'm creating, I think is the world of struggle and difficulties that I had in my 18 years of being an immigrant. And then without me realizing, one concept comes into one solo, or one concept comes into one ensemble piece. But it's kind of like the definition of the world that I've been creating around me while I've been migrating to all these different countries, So yeah, if one thing I can say, it's like this book has helped me a lot. Also the Yoko Ono Grapefruit book I love, which is also just short concepts and short stories. That's it. And Leos Carat's films. I really love all his films. Yeah.
Thank you. Questions from you guys?
After doing your painting, do you have other plans? I have the hunch that you have a lot to teach to other artists or to emerging artists. Have you considered starting a school or something like that?
So I teach, and people want me to teach in Berlin weekly, but I can't because I'm traveling all the time. But I've developed a workshop that if you guys find about it because we're going to announce one soon. And it's called Expansive Radiant Body. And it's a combination of a meditation I developed during my dad's sickness. And then it went into the practice with my dancers. And it's for all levels, even non-dancers. So that workshop I've been teaching internationally. I taught it in Pera Performing Arts School, which is a school that Juilliard School is opening in Cyprus. I taught it at Performance Arts Space, New York. I taught it at The Place in London, and I've taught it at Tanzfabrik in Berlin. And people want me to teach it weekly here, but I can't because I'm traveling all the time. And I don't want to be the type of teacher that I find a substitute teacher because nobody knows how to really teach the classes except me. So I do have a teaching practice and I do love to teach. Yeah, I see myself being a university eventually, and I see myself having a school eventually, but I also have many plans. I want to make short dance films. I'm also acting. I want to tour my solos. I want to make a new piece with my ensemble and also tour it. So there's a lot of dreams. So I think teaching can wait a little bit. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yes, there's another question.
I didn't understand. You have a steady ensemble of so a group?
Yeah.
How much people are there?
15 dancers.
15.
Mm-hmm.
And since when you make it together?
In 2019, when I started a residency in Funkhaus Berlin.
This is okay.
Yeah, that's when it all started.
Okay.
Yeah. And then our first show was Las Casas Invisibles in Funkhaus. Then we had Hermanas Brujas, which was only 5 dancers. Then we had Tierra Quemada, which was 5 dancers too. And then we have Vacío Suspendido, which you guys haven't seen here. Did I put it here? Yeah, 2022. Vacío Suspendido is my first collaboration with the Berlin Stunt Company. So it's stunts with my dancers.
So, but you are the choreographer?
But I'm the
they are
choreographer.
dancer, or are they some choreographers too? So you change the roles of it, or how
I'm always, everything that's KTV Dance Ensemble, I'm choreographing and directing. Yeah. Yeah. I've never been inside of a KTV piece, but I think the next one I'm going to be in. Yeah.
And that's interesting distinction. So the solos is you only, and the ensemble is always KTV.
Yeah, I'm just a control freak. Like when I have the ensemble, I want to be the architect and I want to see everything and construct everything and have control. And I also have a great rehearsal director and a great producer, and they work very well with me, seeing things from outside. But since I'm dancing so much anyways in my solo work, I think it will be cool for my next work to have a scene or something that I do with the dancers. Yeah.
A cameo like Hitchcock.
A little cameo. I know.
Nice.
Yeah.
So is there another question from you guys? Otherwise I come to my last question, and also combined with a thank you, again, also what you mentioned before, that this was very, very personal and very deep. I really appreciate that. Also realizing, also the last, actually all of the talks, they all end up personal, and they all end up about biographies, no? Like what we do, and that's maybe also a reminder, like source your origins, source your traumas. Like this is, I mean, we come where we come from, and I think with everyone that presented here, you could really tell that these are people that have dealt with their past, for the good, for the bad, for whatever. But this is the soil that we grew up in, and you made a very strong point for that. So thank you, really, really appreciate that. My last kind of generic question, always to each speaker here, is what would be a final piece of advice that you could give all the becoming whatever they are, artists, architects, designers?
I have 2 pieces of advice. I feel like you should write your wildest dream. Like write it down. Even if you think you don't have it, like write what will be possibly the coolest thing you could ever do, even though if you think you cannot do it. I wrote on a piece of paper I wanted to have a premiere with 15 dancers and 3 live musicians, and I was like, I would never be able to do that, and somehow I did it. So I think it's very important to manifest and just work towards those things. And I just find it really hard to have dreams and not fulfill them. At least that's me. I don't know if I'm just the nature of who I am, but if anything you imagine, it's probably possible to bring to fruition. And the second piece of advice, I will say, say what you think always, but make sure you have control of when you are, even when you're angry or where you're when you're really passionate about something. I'm just saying this because in my last 3 projects, I've encountered crazy situations with highly big artists where things can get heated on a creative process or even on a job or whatever. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can think something, but you need to take a deep breath and communicate it in a calm way. So don't act out of impulses and always say what you think, but take a deep breath before you say it. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, don't fuck up relationships. Yeah.
Beautiful, thank you.
Yeah.
So warm applause, please, for Kianí.
Thank you.
Thank you again so much for being here. Really, really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you guys for being here also on a Monday evening. We're back next Monday, second to last juxtaposition, and actually it's also nice because the last 2 were kind of more meta level. We're talking to authors, writers, curators, but it was definitely everything kind of exploring the cultural field on more on a meta level, and this was very embodied and beautiful. So next week is also embodied is guerrilla architects, and they are performance artists / architects, but they understand themselves as a performance collective, so we kind of continue with the more embodied practices. That said, have a wonderful Monday evening.